This layout tour is brought to you by the 4th Division of the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association. We do this every month on the second Saturday. Next month, we will be skipping because that's the Boeing swap meet, and we want everyone to go to the Boeing swap meet who's in the Seattle area. So our next meeting, it'll be December 10th. Let's go ahead with the program. Today we have Mark Howe, who lives in Echo Lake, Washington, which is in between Woodinville and Monroe. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and his tour.
Well, hello, everyone. And I'd like to thank you all for attending today. My name is Mark Howe, and I'm a retired ships officer, ship inspector, and hazardous cargo inspector. I've done this video today basically because my voice doesn't last too long.
Hi, I'm Mark Howe, and I'd like to welcome you all to Mark and Marie's Railroad. The story for this railroad begins around 1987. We picked up a Lionel G-scale Gold Rush special train in a train store in Portland, Oregon. This train made an appearance around the Christmas tree and then to the backyard for my first attempt at a figure eight. And of course, back then we were all track powered. That's what began the ball rolling. It was early 1990s that we joined the train club. The train club I speak of is the Puget Sound Garden Railway Society. Without all their knowledge, I would have been stumped on what to do next and how to take care of all the little problems. Soon after that, we acquired about 200 feet of Code 250 Lagasse Creek track and a few turnouts. These were all purchased from another train club member, Dave Goodson. There were many attempts to try and find a name for our railroad, but none really ever stuck. There were a couple of towns that have been named along the way: Fern, Gulch, Ghost Town, the Wine and Dine Mine, and a few more that I can't even remember at this time. We found the train club to be a wonderful help in being able to interact with like-minded people and having them just a phone call away for advice. By 1995, we discovered estate sales, and our roster began to grow, as well as more track from various manufacturers. It also helped having Peter Comley from Sunset Valley Railroad as one of our club members. We grew tired of lugging our trains in and out of the house, so we commandeered the kids' old playhouse. And here we have the kids' old playhouse. It's been revamped a little bit. Excuse all the junk around it. But the trains can come in from the layout, and I put in a guillotine door to allow easy access of the trains in and out of the train shed. To get into the kids' old playhouse, I put in a trap door with snails, and then also inside is a guillotine door, so no one can really get access even by lifting the trap door. Now let's go inside. So once inside, you just lift the guillotine door. And yeah, that can be done from outside, but not as easily. And then I have a number of sidings. However, we needed access to the upper storage shelves. The kids' old playhouse was not too large, and I had very short siding tracks to store trains. So we built an elevator. And so to get access to my storage shelves up above, I put in a small turntable. Locks for it. Lock in the rails. Bring your car on. I set down a block so the cars can't roll off. And then with the use of a drill, I raise the platform. I also had to put in a counterbalance. And I put in a track lock here also. Remove the block. And we have storage. This re-engineered playhouse was only 8 by 8 feet. The elevator was built from an old bed frame, some old bicycle chains, some 3/8" threaded rods, a few bicycle gears, and some scrap wood, and a drill motor from Harbor Freight. And with everything happening this last couple of years, we have had problems with zombies, so I keep plenty of tools at hand. The layout had stretched to 88 feet long. We wanted more, so up we went with a helix. we jumped up 24 inches to the next tier of terraced backyard. I had seen a number of helixes, and the problem with most of them was their inability to be adjusted for changes due to weather, settling, and age. So I came up with my own design that could be adjusted with a simple wrench. Also, it was strong enough to support my 200+ pound weight. I set up a telltale to keep overheights from entering the helix, but there's always someone who will try it anyway. So I'd like to give you a little bit of my track plan at a glance. First we have the helix, which will take you up to the upper terrace. And it used to go all the way along the upper terrace to the far end. At the bottom end of the helix, we have a Y. Here we have the 300-year-old stump through which the train travels. And then it will make a loop in this area if you want to just sit back and have a beer and watch trains run. Or you can run out to the far portion of the yard to the old train shed. And then also, this is the route that you would take to go up the grade into the new train shed, which is here. Early in our railroad building career, we discovered eBay and we purchased a number of Pico buildings for the railroad. Here along the working siding, you will find the town of Fern Gulch. So this is what Fern used to look like, with its delivery truck, water tank, and Burma Shave signs. And you can't forget the train station at Fern with its protesters. So the town of Fern has moved. It starts off with the industrial area of Gaston's Gears and Gizmos. Then we go over to the old folks' home, which is Annie's fuel service, Granny's house, and then the train station that a friend built for me. A few more buildings that we're working on the signage. The fire station's moved here, and Tony's Bakery and Bait. Here is where the mill will set, and we have a few more buildings back by Coco Pele. Then the Bear Bottom River Ranger Station, another little house, and over here will be the Moonshine Mine. All in all, this is the new area for the township of Fern. From the town of Fern Gulch, we move out to the suburbs, where there's a fire station and a Masonic lodge, along with numerous other vignettes and displays that we set up. Also, here's the Alfred Sorensen Museum of Things. And along the road you'll find various curiosities like the Long trailer. Also, you'll find fruit stands. As the Rio Rail bus makes its way to the new train shed, it stops at Rocky Top Mountain, which is close to Coco Pele. On the top of Rocky Top, you'll also find the backpackers, skiers, and adventurers waiting for a train. Coming back down from Rocky Top and heading over to the Helix, you will find another long trailer that has a car that broke down. Of course, the engineer stopped his train to get out and help the driver. And of course, at the base of the Helix, you're going to find Thomas Verba's wood carving studio. Coming back around to the 300-year-old stump, this stump used to be another 6 feet taller, and I had to take it down because it was infested with animals living in the center of it, along with my kids crawling through the center of it. But before I took it down, I cleaned off the top and counted the rings, and I counted 300 rings. Figuring that this tree was probably 100 years old at this time, plus the 300 years for the rings, it was most likely started around 1622. And if you zoom in on the base of the tree stump, you'll find the pioneers making their way to the New World in the West. And looking down on them is the Native Americans from their perch in the tree. Looking up higher on this tree, you're going to find a lone Native American confronting a bear. Well, his family at the village has no idea what's happening to him. And moving further to the south of the helix, we have the fair, with train rides for all. This will give you a generalized idea of what we have done for the placement of buildings and towns on our layout. And of course, after the initial figure 8, we decided definitely we wanted to go dead rail, so we're all battery with remote control. Currently, I'm using Makita batteries, Makita tool batteries, the 18 volts. Our current roster contains a little more than 30 engines that are RC of both diesel and steam. We still have a few track-powered engines, and although I do not have a big layout outside for track-powered engines, we do have some interior room for them. As you can see here, this used to be my mother-in-law's room in the house, and the trains go all the way around the top. She used to enjoy those. Other than that, all we have is a test track on my work table for our track-powered engines. And of course, our club's module, which is 42 by 50 feet, has both the ability to run RC and track-powered, so we can take them there and run some on that system when we need to. We do not have any specific road name on our railroad. We keep our options open in case we find that right priced engine that we just have to have, or cars. After purchasing the buildings, I needed to light them, and I never had good luck with Malibu lighting, the 12-volt lighting system. They would always get wet and short out, and we have sugar ants here that just love to get inside the electronics and short them out. So we dabbled in solar lights from discount stores. These were normally the little $1 lights that would work for a year, maybe more, but then they succumbed to the dreaded electrolysis corrosion. I would clean them up and they would last for another year. In the end, they were good at best for 3 years before they died completely. Then I moved up to the Harbor Freight solar panel kits. These kits are still in operation today. So here is a solar setup that we've had for a long time. This is actually 3 15-watt panels. So you've got 45 watts of power. And my controller and everything is in this box underneath. We're using a little 12-volt, 12-amp-hour battery. And that's the solar controller right there. Right now I just have a plug to plug everything in. Takes the wires out here and down to the railroad where it runs lights. What I'm going to do is put in a dark detector with a timer, so it'll run the lights after dark, but only up until about 11 o'clock when we go to bed. And then it'll come back on about 4 in the morning, so we'll have lights out here when we go to bed and when we get up in the morning. And although these systems worked okay, they were not the greatest systems. They would run out of power if they ran all night long. So I changed things up a little bit. I actually had some solar panels that we took off of an old system. These are 190 watt panels, and I only used one of them. We connected it to a car battery through a solar charge controller, then connected it all to a timer that would run the lights from dusk until about 11 at night, and then from about 4 in the morning till sunrise. And here's a little example of some of the lights that we run off of this new system. Tomaine Tony's Bakery is having a disco setup going. There's a fire in the chimney on the Widget house. And here we have all the holiday lights and the lighting on the new railroad station. And then, as you look into Grandma's house, you'll see she's burning a lot of candles today, orange flickering lights. And then here's one of the different ones. We've used a dollar light to light the inside of a building. Works great, little solar light. And then we move up. Here's the RKO radio station tower with its multi-flashing lights. And then we look back at the flaming light and a few of the holiday lights we have. Okay, so here we have another one of our controllers. You can see it's putting out 15.8 volts at this time. And I have this wired back to these switches. Now this switch does nothing at this time. However, this switch, when I turn it on, powers our remote switches. There's one right here, which throws the turnout on that side. So you do not have to walk up and hand throw a turnout anywhere along the back side. You can walk this front side, have everything at hand's reach, so everything is done remotely. And this is all run from this car battery under here. This system has been running for about 8 years now. No problem, still charging. Now, while we're right here, I'm going to just turn around and show you the new train room. And so with the necessity for more storage space, we took over what was the hot tub room. And here in the old hot tub room, I set up a work table, which stays full, storage bins for different equipment, of course, music. We had to have a TV. We have storage for everything, new kits, trains, storage area for buildings, and then the area for the trains to come in and out. I have a lock and a guillotine, and the trains can come through here. Now you might hear a fan running, which is right here. I have two fans in here. These are run off of two small solar panels up on the roof. So the other fan is here. Anytime during the day, we have a nice breeze blowing through here, just with solar power. So here is the bridge that would go into the new train shed. I'll show you how that sets up. First, you remove the plug, then bring down the bridge, and then you set both pieces in place. And again, we have another guillotine door. You can set the bridge in place and leave the guillotine door down. So as part of the railroad operation, you don't want just trains running around in circles or going point to point. You want to see some animation and you want to hear sounds. So in that respect, we've come up with a sound system that really works good for our railroad. So we have a bandstand here. Our sound system is actually here. This is an Adafruit soundboard. It's about $25. On the other side of it is a small amplifier, which is about another $15. And then it's just a couple of small speakers. And it's all run off a battery pack, 3 AA batteries. Sits here. And then I have back here just a single button. So kids can come up, press the button, and that's just on a single loop, so you can hear that time and again. When you get tired of it, press the button again. Next, let's move off to another soundboard. So here we are out at the railroad workers cabin, and this is another sound device for kids. they have 3 different buttons that they can push. One is barnyard sounds, snoring sounds, or festival. So the top is just made of plexiglass with pop cans as the roofing material. So when we lift off the roof, you can see the electronics, and we have 2 very large speakers here. We have the amplifier here, which you can change the volume up or down, and then again we have our Adafruit board right here, and a set of 3 AA batteries here. So this can be put anywhere on the layout and ran at any time. We turn it on, and we have let's do the festival sounds. You can imagine some old-time railroad workers with the harmonicas and the accordions out playing. Okay, next we'd have barnyard sounds of various types. Okay. And then snoring. Alright, so here's another sound device. It's the same board, however I'm using a larger amplifier. This is the Wine and Dine Moonshine Mine. The electronics are held in this old boxcar, and I have a switch for the kids to use. It reads, "Danger, do not touch." Go ahead, you know you want to. And just to give you a little shot of the electronics. So here in this boxcar, we have the soundboard again. This is the Adafruit soundboard. We have 3 AA batteries, and it is plugged in instead of to an amplifier this time through bass speaker setup, and amplifies that way. And it's protected from the weather, along with protected from prying fingers. And now let's set this off and see what happens. Okay, so we lift the handle, push the button. Okay, and here we have my lighthouse with an Arduino board programmed for a NeoPixel Ring. This is a 25 light NeoPixel Ring. And you can see it's got a nice even run to it. It actually has a white light increasing to a red light and then back down to a bluish white light. And of course the NeoPixel Ring points the light straight up. So to angle them back, I had to put mirrors in all the way around. But it does have a nice appeal to it, especially at night. It's very bright. So as well as running this switch for that turnout, we'll also have solar running this mill. Now here's an example of this mill running on an old Harbor Freight solar panel set. And it was such an inefficient set that you had to put a light on it to make it operate. The hose that you see sticking out here pumps water up from the pond, which I've named Green Lake because I have a green liner to set in it. And it will pump water up and through the water wheel and back down into the pond. That's all solar operation. It's a small solar pump. I tested this system out first to make sure it would actually work. Granted, it was not a sunny day. We had a light placed on the solar panel, but it works. So I dug Green Lake, and then we set it up and ran it in this condition. With the setup I'm going to do now, I'll use a small 12-volt pump and hook it to the car batteries so that it will do the same thing. And I'll put it on a switch so I can turn it on whenever I need it, not just running all day long. And continuing with the idea of sound machines that kids could play with, I've also gotten this little rig set up. Again, this is another Adafruit soundboard, 25 bucks. This actually is what they call a dork amplifier. It can be used stereo or mono. I've got it just mono right here. And it has a volume control, so you can make it louder or quieter. Runs again on 3 AA batteries. These are 3 AAA batteries. Turn the power on. I have a box that I set it into here just so things stay put. And I close the tape up on it. Just so you can set this around. You can set the little cannon out here. And once it completes the full circuit, you can fire it again. Kids seem to enjoy this sort of thing. So about 3 years ago, a good friend of mine passed away, gave me all of his train collection with about 1,000 feet of code 332 track. As you've seen in the back, I have all code 250. And getting a little older and turning 70, I want a raised railroad that I don't have to get on my knees for. So I built this raised railroad. The pieces I used were from old carport metal support frames. I received a lot of galvanized steel from a plant here close at hand. The galvanized steel was all free, and I used a load of lumber. All in all, I have approximately $300 in around 500 feet of layout down below. Now I want to stop right here for a minute because I've already done a video about my new raised railroad. So I'm going to take some cuts from that to show you just what I've done for my new raised railroad. So this year I have decided to raise my railroad. I still have my railroad that's in the backyard, which is about 500 feet on the ground. Even though it's terraced, it's still a little tough to get to. So my new railroad is going to be at least 44 to 30 inches high on the majority of it. There are a couple of places where you can actually just barely duck a hair and you'll get right underneath some of the elevated sections. Now, I've never been one for planning and drawing out everything. I have an area in the back of my pump house that is heavily wooded. The back of the pump house has a 1-foot overhang on the roof, and there's a 3-foot area where it indents. So I started by setting up some angle braces on the roof supports for the car park area next to the pump house. Taking advantage of the 1-foot overhang of the roof behind the pump house, I set up a 12-inch roadway for 2 tracks. As you can see, I used 2x4s for the back braces, and I used 1/2-inch plywood for the road beds. Now, before I go too much further, I want to talk about some of the materials I'm using. As you can see, I've tried 2x4s and 1/2-inch plywood. It's okay for short runs and where you've got a lot of stability. However, I had a chance to pick up some pipes. These are the framing pipes for carports. I was also able to pick up some channel iron that was on its way to the recycle facility. This is all 1/8-inch thick steel channel, along with a bunch of other types of metal. As metal does not bend very easily, I decided to use some plastic again. So I picked up from Lowe's some 1.5 by 5/8 inch plastic strips. And every 8 to 10 inches, I put a spacer to create a ladder. Getting the correct bend to these was a little bit tough, but in the end, I finally did get something that was adequate for making the bends. Unfortunately, these turned out a little expensive. This was about $50 for 2 of these. Some of our new club members are actually building their own railroad using this type of design. So we're curious to see how that comes out. My first job for the raised curves was to dig post holes and set the carport posts in cement. I then took some of the shallow 4-inch wide channel and trimmed the ends so I had a tab on each end that could fit tightly against the carport posts. Next, I attached 2 hose clamps to each of the posts around the tab on that cross member. I used a rubberized felt paper to create friction between the hose clamps and the carport posts. Once all the posts and cross members were connected and leveled, then I set up the 2 curve sections that I had. At this point, I started to realize it was a little dangerous having trains this high on that small of a ladder. This takes me back about 2 years. I was at Murphy's Auto Auction and I picked up lot number 976, which is this center pile of lumber. It's It's actually 1-inch by 10-inch fir. It was milled at a local mill here, and it was heat treated. You can see some of the stuff is curved, but I've taken a lot of that out. Next, I planed the wood, cut it into varying lengths depending on what I needed. You can see that these boards treated with a deck primer are much more stable and in better shape for keeping trains on their tracks, and even if they fall, they're not going to fall far. It was about this time that I decided to switch from my very expensive plastic material to a very inexpensive steel, and the curves would work themselves out nicely. This brings me to some material that my sister-in-law Arlene gave me. This is for airplanes. This is an ABS plastic. It's thin. It's approximately 1/16 of an inch thick. By hand, I bent the two ends over a board that I was using, and then I secured everything in place with bolts and nuts. Another thing that I noted was that the plastic did not have enough structural strength to support in between the piers. So I added some 5-inch steel channel. Also, while using the steel channel, I could span a much larger area without all the extra support. While using 10-inch wide steel channel, I could make a turn very easily just by bending the angle slightly. I also found it was much easier to cut and bend this material and shape it than I originally thought. I was able to get a blade for my skill saw, and it will cut up to 1/8-inch steel very easily, almost like wood. Just a quick reminder here, when you're using power tools, always wear ear protection and really good eye protection. And so currently I have a yard that I use for storage and sorting of all the trains. With this yard, I will eventually have the 2 outside lines that you see on the far side and 3 inside lines, which will eventually be inside of a box that I can lock up for storage, and it'll have an upper shelf in it to store extra rail cars on. Next, I built a table 5 feet wide by 16 feet long out of the scrap metal. I lined it with 3-foot by 5-foot sheets of the cement board, and then I lined it with some buildings and set a couple of rails out. This will be a city/yard. In my first attempt to span a full 10 or 12 feet with these metal beams, it was a little wobbly. So I used some of Brent's technology also, and the equipment he gave me, to support the center of the beam. So far, I've not completed either end of the loop yet. However, I do plan to be running by this summer. So keep an eye out for the progress. I will be posting YouTube videos on this. And if you look at the back of this shot, you will see the club's large trailer. We're storing that here in my yard. I wanted to show you a little bit of my new raised railroad, but we had 12 inches of snow just between last night and today. I do still have intentions of connecting the front and the rear railroads. I will have to deal with approximately a 7-foot change in elevation. So it will be a matter of a very large helix, which is still in the design stage. And so this is a general rundown on my railroad. I am a dead railer. We have approximately 30 engines that are battery with RC. Most of my RC are the train engineer, the Revolution train engineers. I have built my own RC controls before from an article in the 2014 Garden Railway magazine. These were called Junior Throttles, and I built 6 of them for myself, and I built 3 of them for friends. So unfortunately, you cannot get all the pieces that you need for building these anymore. I also have a couple of the RCS controllers, and I have one of the old train engineer controllers. For our railroad, I enjoy doing the building, and the daily operations are just a sideline. Everything on this railroad is about coming up with new ideas for fun projects for kids to enjoy, animation, sound, lights, all the fun things. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you down the rails. Questions and answers now?
Okay. Well, I hope it was entertaining.
Thank you, Mark. That was a lot of information about a lot of different topics all in one video. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Who's got questions?
I've got one for you, Mark. I
Yes,
was
Lee.
wondering, with all the buildings and that sort of things outside during the winter, do you take those back
I
indoors?
just had a
Yes, commonly I'll take in the majority of the buildings and do the cleanup and refurbishing during the winters. They sit on the shelves inside my newer train room.
The other question I have is your pop can roof on the one building. How did you get the corrugated shape? Do you have a little roll or something you run those through? That's pretty clever.
I do, and I don't know if I had it here or not. Let me take a quick peek. Right here. This is a paper roller, actually, and I picked this one up at Hobby Lobby, I think, for about $4, maybe $5. It does very good for the aluminum. You do have to, when you cut a pop can open, lay it out flat and put it in the oven. I can't remember the temperature they recommend, but it's not really hot, but you want to heat the metal up some so it relaxes it. And then I actually roll the metal through this without even heating them at times. And they do make better rollers. This one's just an inexpensive one, but so far I've done all my roofing for a number of buildings and it's still working great.
It looks great.
Thank you. Hardest thing is cutting pop cans open and not cutting yourself.
Great presentation. I really, really appreciated that, Mark. When I heard you rolling off your elevator, I heard a good sound of click, click, click. Have you converted all your wheels from plastic to metal?
I am in the process of doing so. It's a little tough. Again, estate sales are the best way I found to get metal wheel sets. But and with our club's module, a lot of the members want everyone to have metal wheel sets because the plastic wheels do dirty up the tracks. And of course, for me, it doesn't matter. I'm a dead railer anyway, but there are a lot of track powered guys in the club, and they do have to keep running the cleaning cars over the tracks. So yeah, I try to go with steel wheels when I can.
I have a standing joke with my wife that when we first moved into our house, I was doodling some track plans and I said to her, boy, I'm sure glad our basement isn't any bigger than it is. Because it's going to take my whole life to get this thing full of trains, which has turned out to be true. And I just wanted to know how big your lot is, because if I understood the end of your presentation, you have a raised layout on one side of your house and a surface layout on the other side, and you're planning to connect them with a 7-foot high helix. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I actually have a 1 acre lot here.
Okay,
but
good.
So it is have a lot of room.
So you're limited to 1 acre, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, especially for the wife. She
okay, great.
If I get any new trains, I have to get rid of some of the older ones.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, and for everybody's knowledge, I do have a YouTube channel that I've made a lot of videos for the club by. It's called Garden Railroading Join the Fun. So if you just go to YouTube and Google Garden Railroading Join the Fun, you'll see that. In fact, our clinics that we normally do in February, this last year, I put them together in a video for each of them. And I'm going to try and do that this next year too. So if you're ever interested in any of the clinic subjects that we have, why, you can go and look on there. And for the Adafruit boards, I've actually done one. It's got a motion sensor. So they are a lot of fun to do, even just things setting around the railroad, as well as different mindsets. They do get a little noisy. They do get a little noisy at times. Okay. Yes.
Hi there. I see you're using some PVC pipe for some of your supports, like on the Helix, and I wondered to what extent there's any issues with it getting brittle over time, exposed to the sun for months at a time.
I have used quite a bit of PVC pipe in the different runs. I have not had a lot of problems with it getting brittle. The Helix has been up now for, I'd say, about 8 years. And although the fence boards that I used are getting a little rough, I'm going to have to replace a few of those. The PVC has done good.
So Mark, can you talk a little bit how you do the cleaning of your railroad and with equipment and debris and stuff like that? How often do you clean it? And
I do try to clean it a few times a year. Normally, the nice thing is I just go out with a leaf blower and takes me about an hour to 2 hours to blow most of the loose leaves off. Out front, I have a worse problem because this is around some 80 and 90-year-old cedar trees, and they tend to drop a lot of branches and such. Haven't had any damage problems yet, but a lot of leaves and limbs on the railroad. Most of the problems I tend to have are my tracks are not secured to any road beds. They're free floating, and I have to reballast each year. So that's about the main thing. And actually right now, excuse me, right now I'd have a little trouble running trains because we're tearing up a lot of what used to be a stepping stone walkway out the back. And I'm going to have a complete cement slab poured along the end. It's be a little more stable, especially for myself and some of the members that are older. Oh, and anybody who is after any of the clinics that I've done, you can always email me. My main email that I use is trainman with my last name, Howe, H-O-W-E, at gmail.com. So trainman Howe. And I try to keep most of my clinics on my computer so I can send them out when people want them. But for the soundboards and the different projects I've done.
I had another question, Mark. You set up that lift bridge with a electric motor.
Yes.
Why did you need an electric motor? Is that just because you really obviously enjoy projects, or could you just have?
I'm lazy and I don't want to do a hand crank.
Because yeah, I was just thinking I'd put a handle on it and just shove it up and down, being as lazy as I am.
Well, you could, but I've always enjoyed mechanical items and trying to figure out how to get the bicycle chains and the gears to work correctly on all 4 lifts.
Right.
And it was a fun project, and I don't think I've got $50 into that. It's a couple of old bed frames.
Yeah.
I think the Harbor Freight drill was only about $15, and
yeah.
Yeah.
Some of you remember Al Fresh, who used to have a large N-scale layout on Whidbey Island, and he moved to Tucson and built a double deck N-scale layout, and he has a lift similar to what you did that's about 6 feet long, so he can run a full train onto it. And then he used 2 drawer slides to make it very smooth in its operation up and down. Mm-hmm. And that's how he connects between the 2 loops. He just runs the train on and raises it up and runs it off again.
That would be a nice option.
A lot easier than a helix.
Yeah. Definitely, especially when you get into the larger scales. I like to do a lot of things with the solar and the lights. You can see behind me here. You can pick these light bulbs up. They screw into a 110-volt circuit. They're just LED flaming lights. They have 3 different actions. One's flaming, one is flashing on and off, and another one is just solid light. Mm-hmm. But what we found, actually, if anybody's familiar with Adam Savage, he did a YouTube video on taking one of these and turning it into a 3-volt operating system. So there's just 3 AA batteries running that thing, and it'll run for about 4 or 5 days on those 3 AA batteries. Now I've set up a couple in the backyard too, and actually I've gotten small power converters, and these will bring your power down from 12 volts because I use car batteries down to about 3 to 5 volts, whatever you need for some of the lighting systems. And I really enjoyed doing, I enjoy looking out the window in the evenings and seeing lights on the railroad. It's a lot of fun, and have them turn off at 11 o'clock and then come back on at 4 or 5 when we get up in the mornings. It's just, it makes me feel good.
Mark, I'm going to share the screen with your Adafruit soundboard diagram, and you could just briefly explain to us what we're seeing.
Okay. So yeah, starting off with your battery pack, you only need about 4 to 4.5 volts for the operation of these units, and a 3 AA or AAA battery pack up there in the upper left-hand corner. That'll run the whole system. You split the power off to the Adafruit board down below, and then over to the right side to your amplifier. And Dork amplifier, the Dork is just a brand name. And then they have a lot of different varieties. I think I picked these up for about $6 or $8, and they do have some for around 15. And it'll have a volume control on it. They work pretty well. You have to go from your Adafruit soundboard with the 3 leads, the green, black, and red, up into your amplifier. And then from there, the power goes out to your 2 speakers. Now, your Adafruit soundboard, you will have a little programming in there. And I did a video on, or a YouTube clinic on this, and a YouTube video and a clinic on this. And like I said, you can have up to 11 different switches. So you've got a large variety of what types of sounds and different things you can play on this. And the boards, if I remember right, they're about 5 gigabytes. I don't, let's see if it says here. These are 16 gigabyte boards that I buy. And you can put a lot of information if you use the reduction system of an OOG file instead of a WAV or an MP3 format. MP3s, you get maybe 1 or 2 sounds on there. With an OOG format, you can take the same exact sounds, and they don't sound that bad, and you can bring that up to 40 or 30 or 40 different sounds, and all different types of things you want to use for the railroad. So any questions on those?
Yeah, so you could potentially, the example you showed us had 3 different sounds
Yes.
on the control board, but you're basically saying you could have up to 10 different sounds coming out of that same speaker.
11. It starts with a
11.
0. Yeah.
Okay.
So up to
Yeah.
11 different triggers, and numerous sounds coming out of each one, depending on what you want. That's like the cattle car that I have here. I've put, I think, 7 or 8 different sounds off one trigger. So it's just a movement sensor.
Yeah.
Triggers that.
Yeah.
And the cannon is just a one-time shot. I forget what the programming is on that, but in the clinic that I wrote out, it tells you all the different formats for using that. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question, Mark. Is the Adafruit soundboard polyphonic, meaning will it piggyback several sounds if you trigger several, or what are they sequential?
No, mono. Yeah, it's only a single at a time.
Okay.
One at a time. Yeah. One soundtrack. So you'd have to you could merge your different soundtracks if you wanted into one of the other triggers. So say triggers 1 through 5 had 5 different sounds, and then triggers 6 or 7, you could merge all those sounds into one and play it through there. So you could do different variations like that.
Do you want to repeat when your open house is going to be?
Oh, yes. I wanted to make sure everybody knew. For our train club, the Puget Sound Garden Railway Society, I'm holding the September of next year, so 2023 September open house, which will be usually the third Saturday in September. And it'll be here at my place. Anyone here who'd like to come, they're welcome to stop by while we have our meeting and run a train. If you want to bring your own, that's fine too. But yeah, so that'll be September of next year.
Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Well,
that's
thank you.
a very impressive pair of model railroads you have there.
Well, and it's not just mine. The wife does a lot too. My wife Marie does fantasy trains. In fact, I think one of her fantasy trains you saw running there.
That's great.
Yeah, and thank everybody there. I'm glad everybody showed up today. Hope you all enjoyed this.
Thanks, Mark.
This was great, Mark. This has to be one of the premier examples of mechanical, civil, and electrical know-how that I've seen. You've done some marvelous things.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed being a jack of all trades. I may not be a master of any, but I'm a jack of all.
That's great.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other announcements? I already mentioned that a month from today will be the Boeing swap meet. And somebody said something about where it's located, but I forgot to pay attention.
It's at the Kent Commons in downtown Kent on 4th and James Street. Starts at 9:30 a.m.
Right, as usual. That's great. And we'll see you all back here in December, on December 10th. And until then, I wish you much fun with trains. We'll close it up there.
We'll see you down the rails.
Yep.